My name is Anna Mike, and I'm a Scrum Master. And in the name of all our team, we would like to welcome you on the third edition of Wrocław Agile Development Conference. Although this year we've changed the name from Wrocław Agile Day, it's still the same event with the same purpose. We would like to share with you our knowledge, experience, our stories and lessons learned. We're really happy that so many of you decided to spend the day with us, and we hope that you're going to enjoy every moment of that. This year, we decided to use the opportunity and within organizing the conference, support the most needed. All proceeds from the tickets will be given to the Formuła Dobra, our lower Silesian hospice for children. We are extremely happy that we can celebrate that fact even more by having our special guest today with us, Dr. Krzysztof Schmidt, the chairman of the board and director of the hospice. Welcome, Dr. on the stage.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. And I represent Home Hospice for Children. If I could say in some words, we were created about 3 years ago. And at the beginning, which was a very difficult time for us, we had no money, no cars, no salaries for our personnel, but we believed in what we are doing. And right now, we are one of the biggest in Poland. So if you believe in something, you can. Thank you very much.
In the foyer, you can find the kindness book, where you can write and share the good words with everyone. In your starter packs, as a gift of appreciation, you will find the bookmarks and small cards with a kindness quote prepared by Formuła Dobra. We really encourage all of you to find a moment and sign up in the kindness book during our breaks. We'd also like to say a huge thank you to Evena, our sponsor, who supported us this year with selling the tickets. This year we've prepared for you 2 tracks, collaboration and technical, and 2 keynotes. Collaboration track and all keynotes will take place in this room, the technical one in the room next to this one. On the doors you can find the dedicated track agendas with all of the titles of presentation. Each presentation will be 45 minutes long, with the 15 minutes break. And we also encourage you to share with us your feedback. So in each room, you can find a feedback box. So please make sure that before you leave the room after the presentation, leave the opinion about it. So you can find there 3 colors of sticky notes, green, yellow, and pink, which is positive, neutral, and negative feedback. We'd really like to hear your opinion about presentations. We also have 1 general feedback box, the purple one in the main foyer. At 1 p.m., we are having an hour lunch break. Lunch is provided for all of you and is taking place in the hotel restaurant at the ground floor. After the closing keynote, we would like to invite all of you for the after party with an open bar where we will be continuing the networking and sharing our stories. All information can be found in the booklets that you got during your registration. And if you have any question, feel free to approach our staff. On our name IDs, all our staff has a blue bar at the bottom. And the last organization with, I promise, we had a small change in our collaboration agenda. There are some things not under our control, and unfortunately, Sylvia McDonald can't be with us today. So instead of Sylvia talk, we're gonna have a small workshops about different types of feedback run by Helen Wisowski. So really recommend that session, so feel free to join us. Without further ado, it's time to introduce our first speaker, who will give us an opening keynote and who will be introduced by Artur Michalczyk, our CTO.
Welcome everyone, and I would like to introduce Ashley Unitt, who is our Chief Research Officer. He's the founder of NewVoiceMedia. He's been with the company since its inception, obviously, and talking about believing. And he had the vision for the company. Two people started it. 15 years later, we're more than 400 people. Great company, and when he was starting the company, it was similar, that you cannot do it. There was no technology available that could build platforms the way he envisioned it. And there were people saying you cannot build a call center scaling in cloud to more than 25,000 agents. Today we're 45,000 on the way above it. And this is all by a virtue of hard work and having a vision, believing in it, and then having people around you that follow the vision, organize it, and deliver it. I was thinking, introducing Ashley, I should say something personal also about him, and I thought about it a long time, and then I realized that actually the best introduction for Ashley, personal thing, is that why he's here. You probably, most of you don't know, our company was sold this week. So he, being a founder of the company, is a big moment for Ashley, because this is his life's work, being kind of entering to the next stage where we will be further growing, but it's a huge change for him. He's kind of giving away his baby almost. And the fact that he's here, supporting this event, he came here actually a few days where there was a total frenzy of activities, communication, discussions on the highest level. He was committed to this event. We didn't know when this event is going to happen, the sale. And we knew this was planned, and he was here almost the whole week, working with the team, helping with the event, preparing, because he wants to share with people his experiences, and he wants to make it's almost a cliche, but he wants to make the world a better place. So, Ashley.
Good morning. How do you follow that? I mean, it's quite humbling. But I suppose it leads in quite nicely to what I wanted to talk to you today about. I wanted to talk about building great teams and building great companies, because it's something that's very sort of dear to my heart, and it's also very much key to Agile, because Agile is not just about technology, it's not just about processes, it's very much about people and culture. That's just as important. And that's what I wanted to go through today. Because often, when you're sort of starting out on an Agile journey and when you're sort of really embedding it in a company, it can be really actually quite hard because of the way that we all think and the way that we behave and the habits and the beliefs that we've built up over our lives, habits and beliefs that are based on our experiences, based on the past, based on what's worked well for us, and what hasn't, and what's gone on there back, probably a lot of it back in the 20th century. So very often we sort of organise ourselves, organise our companies, organise our teams based on what worked back then, even just sort of 20 years ago. It's kind of hard to think that 20th century is not that far behind us. But the world's actually changed an awful lot. Things have moved on very, very quickly, and that pace of change is just increasing. So a lot of the ways that we've done things, a lot of the ways that we work and organise ourselves don't quite work so well anymore. So we need new ways of thinking, new ways of working, new ways of coming together if we're going to really succeed in the 21st century. So that's my talk, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. So I wanted to start thinking about, well, what is the 21st century? What sort of really characterises it? And this is a view of the 21st century back from when I was a child, which I hope to think was not that long ago. And here we have sort of flying cars and hoverboards and Mr. Fusion. We didn't get any of that, unfortunately. I'd love to have a DeLorean like that, but unfortunately we didn't get it. But we did get a lot of change. We did get the rise of the internet. We did get smartphones and social media. Things that have really sort of changed our world. Things that have changed the way that we work and we play, the way that we shop and the way we vote. Big changes there. And it's changed the companies we all work with and the companies we use every day. So companies like Facebook and Amazon and Netflix and Google, they didn't exist that many years ago. They're all relatively new. So when I was researching this, I was thinking about some stats on companies. So I did some research. And if you look back at the end of the 1960s, look at the Fortune 500 biggest companies in the US. And back then, the average lifespan of a company in the Fortune 500 was 75 years. Now, if you look at the beginning of this decade, there's only 67 of those 500 companies left. There were the 500 biggest companies in America at the back of the end of the 1960s. There's huge change. And there's change about the amount of data there is in the world. If you look at the amount of data, there's 90% of the data in the world was created in the last 2 years. And every minute there's 500,000 new Snapchat messages, 2.4 million Google searches, 4 million new videos on YouTube. It's just massive amounts of data. And we live in an increasingly globalized world, an increasingly interconnected world. I was thinking this morning, remembering back when I was a child, and I was at my aunt's, and we had relatives in Australia. And we actually, to phone our relatives in Australia, we had to book a phone call 7 weeks in advance just to talk to Australia. And you think, that's just nuts. Like every day we're talking, even sort of yesterday evening, we were talking to people. There was in our company, we were talking to people in San Francisco. We were also simultaneously talking to people in Australia and Florida. And that's not a big amount of time for all these things to change. And we also our expectations have changed. We expect everything to be a lot more personalized. It's no longer good enough to think, okay, well, you're a A1, I'm a B2, you're a C3, and be in sort of big groups and have this mass market TV and mass market advertising. We expect everything to be personalized just to us, personalized to our individual interests, needs, and desires. So there's massive change there. Yet, quite often, the way that we still organize ourselves and the way that we still work is based on ways that have worked back in the 20th century. So, think about what characterizes the 20th century. I think this, something you've probably not heard of, but this is one of the most important people in the 20th century. This is Frederick Taylor. He's the inventor of scientific management. And Frederick really came to prominence in the 1900 Paris Exposition. What Frederick's done, he's bought a working copy of his steel mill, the Midvale Steel Company, and he set it up in the Paris Exposition. Now, Frederick, all his life, he's been really, really obsessed with sort of detail and precision, and working out how things work. And what he's done is applied this process of making steel. So, before Frederick, making steel was really a very involved, very skilled process. It took a lot of learning to get to be a real craftsman to make steel. And Frederick turned this on its head. He looked at the process of making steel, and he really broke it down into lots of individual steps. And he made sure that he really thought about these steps, documented them, he looked at the process. He was an inventor of the sort of, can't think of the word for it now, but he looked at the process and he looked at how to make it more efficient, how to sort of shave seconds off here and there in the process, and really sort of codify it, get it simple. And he got fantastic results. Because Frederick's steel mill, they could produce 50 foot of steel every minute. Everybody using the old methods, the best of the other companies, could produce only 9. And not only could he do a lot more steel, he could do a lot more cheaply because he didn't need skilled craftsmen. He could bring somebody in, he could teach them that small part of that process, and they could be up and productive and producing steel very, very quickly. So a lot more efficient, a lot more cheap. So his ideas really sort of took off. Only 8 years later, it was Henry Ford that applied the same ideas to the process of mass producing cars. So produce the first mass-produced car, the Model T. Any colour you like, as long as it's black. So same car, exactly the same, time after time after time. And you see why this has got a lot of appeal. It gives great results, and it's picked up around the world, and it's the basis of what we've done for a lot of the 20th century. If you think about it, it's done amazing things. I mean, maybe it's pinnacle is the Second World War, and if you look at the most important thing in the Second World War, what is, to me, it's the production output of the United States. And when they entered the war in 1941 to the end of the war in 1945, they produced 48 aircraft carriers, 60,000 tanks, 4 million trucks. And I think that's really what wins the war. It's not about who's got the best generals, who's got the best tactics. It's about who produces the most stuff. So you can see why these ideas have great effect. And you can see how it shaped things, shaped the idea of having specialized teams working in their sort of individual silos, having that command and control at the top, because it's incredibly successful and it really, really works. But now we're sort of starting to see the limitations of that, seeing where that's sort of breaking down. Because now we're looking at different problems. If you look at systems thinking, this is where this is a way of thinking about different kinds of problems. This is a bit of theory. This is the theory bit. So you've got systems thinking says there's 4 different classes of problems. There's simple problems, which you don't really need to think about too hard to solve, because they're simple. There's complicated problems. Things like making steel. Things like producing a Model T Ford. Something where it's very replicable, time after time after time. And if you apply Frederick's ideas, they're fantastically good at this kind of problems. Break down the problem, put it into smaller steps, make each of them as efficient as possible. But then you move on to complex and chaotic problems. And what really characterizes them? What characterizes complex problems? Well, it's when you have a lot more interactions, a lot more feedback loops, a lot more things going on. And that's the kind of problems we tend to get these days. But particularly when you're creating software, creating big, complex software environments, that's where the problems tend to live. And maybe a way of sort of thinking about this is to think about these 2 different things. So if you think about problems in Newtonian physics, like when to predict when a comet will appear in the sky, it's quite a complicated problem. But all you really need to do is you need to work out the equations, work out how things interact, plug the numbers into the equations, and you've got your answer. And that works for an awful lot of problems. It works enough to predict when comets come, you can predict. For many hundreds of years, we've been able to predict when comets will next appear in the sky with great precision. It's enough to put a man on the moon. But if you think about predicting the weather, that's very different. It's got lots more interactions in that. And that even today, with massive amounts of computing power and massive amounts of effort put into it, you can only really predict the weather with any certainty maybe 3-4 days out. Like 3-4 days versus centuries ahead. And that's more and more the kind of problems we need to solve these days. So, if you buy my idea, what are we going to do about it? What new ways, what new techniques can we apply to surviving in this new complex world? Well, we can look at some of the lessons from the past. We can look at what other people have done to give us some pointers. There's some things we can do, some ways that we can change how we behave and how we think. So my first example is around airline safety, because that's been a great success. If you think about airline safety, it's an incredibly safe way to travel. If you look at the stats, what about flying within the USA? It's easy to get stats there. If you fly within the continental US, you are statistically more likely to be elected president of the US sometime in your life than you are to die on that flight. It's that safe. And how do they do this? Well, it's been through a process of constant improvement, constant refinement. And for the first 27 years of airline flight, they applied the same principles really, really well. They'd look what went wrong with an aircraft, why did the crash occur, looking at it in a lot of detail. And they come up with more and more process, more and more checklists. If this kind of thing happens, then check all these things. This is what you do, and you'll be fine. So let's take this example. This is United Airlines 173. It's the 28th of December, 1978. And the flight's coming into Portland, Oregon. Getting ready to land, and they put the gear down. Clock. Bit of a problem. Gear warning light comes on. They're not sure if the gear has come down properly or not. Now, they need to think, okay, obviously if the gear's not down properly, not a good idea to land. They need to sort something out. So they do what they're supposed to do. They get out their big binder, and they start going through the checklist of things to check. And the captain's there very firmly in command, making all the decisions, deciding what to do, what to go through. And they go into a holding pattern around the airfield while they work out what's going on. And then working through the checklist, working out what's wrong, takes a bit of time, a few more laps of the airfield. Can't work out what's right. So, what do? They decide they're going to go and fly past the control tower. They're going to get the visual check. So one guy in the control tower gets the binoculars out, they fly nice and slow, nice and low past the airfield, they check the gear, they do the visual check. And they go, yeah, it looks okay, looks like it's down fine. And what's actually happened? It is actually fine. What's happened is there's been a bolt that's corroded and broken. So rather than coming down smoothly, the gears come down with a bang. Set up to warning light. Everything's fine. Do their final checks. They clear the runway, get the fire engines out, getting ready to land. But this has all taken quite a lot of time. They've been flying around the airfield now for over an hour and a half. And the first mate has actually said to the captain twice, there's a low fuel warning. But we don't know what's happened there. We don't know whether the captain didn't hear. We don't know whether the captain decided it was not important at that time and was thinking about other things. And they come down ready for the final approach. They're getting ready to land. And first, one engine cuts out. Second, third, fourth. They're out of fuel completely. And they crash into the woods before the runway. And 8 passengers die and 2 crew. It's been completely avoidable. There was actually nothing wrong with the plane. The gear was down fine. Now, they investigate this, and around the same time, there's about actually 3 or 4 similar incidents. And this prompts them to think of a rethink. They need to think, okay, our old ways aren't working so well anymore. We need to think of something different. What are we going to do differently? And this is what they come up with. It was a way of training the crews on all the airlines, a new approach called crew resource management. And they nicknamed it Charm School. They retrained everybody. And what's this all about? Well, this is about teamwork and empowerment and adaptability and agility, getting everybody to work together as a team, getting everybody to think through the issues, being able to adapt very quickly to actually what's happening, changing the old ways of just having just the captain in control, making all the decisions. And this had a big effect. So, go through, it says a few years later, this is effective chancellor, a completely different incident. This is UA232, 19th of July, 1989. Quite an old DC-10. And you can see there, it's a 3-engine aircraft. It's going into Sioux City, Iowa. Long way through the flight, it's an enormous bang in the back of the aircraft. The rear engine's exploded. The plane starts to veer over to the right. The pilot and the co-pilot are yanking on the controls because they've got to right it, because they know if it tips over too far, it's going to flip over and they're not going to be able to control the aircraft at all. And they're quick thinking, the co-pilot to remain the engines, pulls back the throttle on the left-hand engine, pushes forward the throttle on the right. And he managed just to right the aircraft. Now, that day, there's a passenger on the plane. He's actually a flight instructor. He's one of the guys that teach airline pilots how to fly. So he makes himself known to the air stewardess, and the captain invites him up to help out. So the flight instructor lies there on the floor. He's controlling the throttles. Pilot and the co-pilot are still trying to pull on the joysticks. Now, they don't quite know what's happened yet. But what's actually happened is the rear engine has exploded, and it's sent its turbine blades flying through the back of the aircraft, slicing through the back of the aircraft. And it's actually sliced through all 3 hydraulic systems, all 3 redundant systems. They've got absolutely no control. They've got no way of controlling any of the control surfaces, the flaps on the aircraft. All they've got is the engines. So they talk through it between the 3 of them. And they soon realise the only thing that they're doing that's actually having an effect is the engines. So the captain, he gives up his seat. He puts a flight instructor in the seat. Just a guy that a few minutes ago was just a passenger on the plane. Takes it over, and they're controlling on the throttles of the engine. They've managed to turn the plane around. They can turn it right round. They can turn it just in one direction. They turn it around, they face the airfield, clear all the runways. They bring the plane down, and just at the last minute, as they're about to touch down, the plane tips slightly and catches the right wing, and they crash. But that day, they save over half the passengers on that plane. And something they go back and they look at this in the flight simulator and they try and recreate this situation. Every time in the flight simulator, they try way more than 20 times, more than 20 times to try this. Every time, plane crashes, everybody dies. This is amazing that they got anybody out of this. And it's all due to this new approach. It's all due to the CRM approach around empowerment, agility, working together. Seeing the captain there, giving up control and working as a team around this. So that's some of the lessons, that's some of the keys, but there needs to be a bit more than that. So the next lesson, next story I want to tell you is about the Apollo space mission. And this is around communication. So, 1962, President Kennedy, with the USA are behind in the space race, they've been beaten by the Soviets. They need to do something. So President Kennedy says, okay, we're going to have this big plan. We're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. 1963, things aren't going so good. NASA is already over budget, they're already behind schedule. They're not going to do it. They need to do something differently. So we bring in a management consultant called George Mueller. He's an electrical engineer, and he looks at the problem, and he works it out and thinks, well, what does he see? Well, he sees there's all the different NASA facilities, all the different NASA departments. There's all the different contractors, because they've brought in loads of different contractors across the USA. And they're all in their little teams and their little groups, all in their little silos. And all the communication is flowing up to headquarters. The headquarters is making all the decisions and then flowing the information and the orders back down. So George has a very radical plan. He says they're going to change this. Rather than the information flowing up and down, they're going to have the information flowing across. Now, this doesn't go down too well with Werner von Braun. He's the boss of NASA and he's used to having his own way and being that king of the castle there. But after a bit of a political scrap, George gets his way. And they actually stop work on the Apollo program for a bit. They stop work on building all the rockets and things. And they focus on building a communication network. They build a massive communication network that connects all the different NASA facilities and the facilities of their contractors. And George puts in a new rule that every day, every one of the teams and all the different facilities, all the different teams and the contractors, they need to talk to their peers across the organisation, collaborate and work with their peers in the different parts of the organisation. And no longer is the information going to flow up and down, it's going to flow across. And that's one of the keys to why the Apollo mission succeeded, is that communication flow. But communication doesn't need to be just across. It also needs to be up and down. You need to be setting the strategy and direction, setting the mission and the purpose from above. Everybody needs to be pulling in the same direction. But it needs not just to be about talking, telling people stuff. The flip side of communication is you need to be around listening. Listening is just as important as telling. And here's an example of what happens when people don't listen, where they forget that part of communication. So this is the challenges of disaster, January 1986. So around that time, NASA's under a lot of pressure. They've been told they need to do more. They need to have more shuttle launches. They need to be getting more results for their money. So previously they've launched in the spring, they've launched in the summer, they've launched in good weather. Now, this January it's particularly cold. It's cold even for January. It's about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, around about freezing. But they're committed to do a launch. So they decide, the NASA headquarters decide to go and check with all their contractors, because the shuttle's only been designed to work at 40 degrees Fahrenheit and above. So they go, okay, well, we need to check, is this going to be safe? And they check across their contractors. There's one of their contractors, Morton Fire. They produce the rubber seals that connect together the different sections of the solid fuel rocket boosters. And the engineers there, they look at this rubber, they think, do the tests, work out this rubber is actually going to be quite brittle at that temperature. It's not going to be safe. So they raise it with their managers. Their managers raise it with a NASA executive, saying, we don't think this is safe to launch. Now, NASA executives, they're under a hell of a lot of pressure. Their jobs are on the line. They've been told they need to launch. So they go, Mont Firecop, what are you telling us? Are you telling us we can't launch to April? No, we need to go for it. And so Mont Firecop managers, they gave in. They said, okay, yeah, you can go for the launch. And this is the result. And that's what happens when you don't listen. That's what happens when you forget that part of communication. So, if we take those lessons, what does it mean to us as leaders? And I don't mean just the guys here that are sitting at the top of the pyramid, because we're all leaders here. Leadership is not the same as authority or management. Leadership is a state of mind. And the fact that you guys have turned up today probably means that you're leaders too. So what does it mean to all of us? What does it mean about how we should behave and how should we think of ourselves and what should we do? Well, we need to stop thinking of the leader as this kind of grand chess master, setting all the grand strategy, many moves ahead, guiding, pushing all the pawns around the board. It just doesn't scale anymore. It just doesn't. No one person can have all the information to be able to make all those decisions, to be able to make all those right decisions. So we need to think of ourselves differently. So rather than being the chess master, we need to be a gardener. We need to be setting the right environment, the right atmosphere for people to grow, for people to be making the right decisions. We need to be carefully tending that garden, making sure that it's well looked after. And yeah, occasionally we need to do some weeding as well. If things aren't right, we need to take out those weeds. It doesn't mean we don't have to make tough decisions. Yeah, absolutely we do. But we need to think about this. We need to think of ourselves as leaders, as gardeners. It needs to be around climate control, not command control. Now, some might sound a bit utopian, might sound a bit airy-fairy, but it's very hard-nosed. It's how people see success. For instance, if you look at companies like Google, nobody can say that Google's not a successful company, it's not a large company. They do a lot of these things, they practice a lot of these things. They practice radical trust, they practice communication, they practice radical empowerment. And maybe a good example of this is to think about and look at Google when they were very small, when they were a startup in a garage in Silicon Valley. What did they do? Well, one of the things they did is every Friday afternoon, they'd go out and they'd have a basketball game. Now, you might think this is a bit nuts, because if you're trying to build a company that's going to take over the world, why are you taking time out to have a basketball game? Surely you should be building great technology. They're hammering things out on the keyboard. Well, it wasn't really about the basketball game, it was about what happened during that game. Because it was a chance for the founders of Google to talk to their people, to tell people what was going on, to tell them very openly what were the problems, what were the challenges, how could they solve them, and get their people talking, get them to give feedback, ask any questions they liked. And this still carries on today at Google. No, they don't have basketball games, but they do every Friday afternoon. They do have their leadership presenting what's going on in companies, what's actually happening, what's coming ahead. They present absolutely tons of highly confidential information to their people in Google, to their tens of thousands of people around the world. And guess what? Only very, very rarely any of that leak. It's because they practice that trust, because it's so deeply ingrained in their culture that they do have that trust, and their people do respect that. And also they encourage a lot their employees, their people, to ask difficult questions, to ask tough questions, to really probe and understand what's going on there. So they do it, a lot of people do it, we do it. It does lead to success. So, in summary, these are my rules, suggestions, ideas for how to build really great teams. What things should we focus on? Well, the basis of it is trust. Without a lot of trust, you can't have a lot of the other things. You can't have empowerment. You can't have really open communication. Trust is the bedrock of everything. You have empowerment. You need to have everybody involved. You need to have everybody making those decisions, because you can't do it with just a few people at the top anymore making those decisions. It's just too complex to do that. You need to have that ability to be able to react quickly, that agility. So you need to have empowerment to do that. Then, for people to make good decisions, you need to have communication. You need to have lots of communication. You need to be setting the strategy, the purpose, the vision, all the context, all the information people need to be able to make those great decisions. And you need to remember that the big part of communication is not just the tell, it's the listen. You need to be listening to what everybody's telling you, what's actually going on. Listening to the people that are actually at the coalface doing the work, because they'll know what's going on with your company than anybody in the leadership position there. And you need to not forget to actually lead. You've got this empowerment, you've got this trust and so on, but you need to lead. You need to lead by example. You need to lead by setting the inspiration for everybody within your team, within your company. You need to be setting that mission, that goal, that vision, that purpose. And you need to be at times making tough decisions. You do need to be decisive. You do need to also forge ahead. And you need to get that balance right. But there we go. That's my ideas. That's what I think it takes to build really great agile teams. And I hope you got something out of that. And so I was going to now, I think we've got time for a couple of questions. 3 minutes, yeah. Got any questions from the audience? Kevin, come on.
Right, I may ask, don't you think that part of this problem is based on the metaphor the IT was grown upon, which is the factory and manufacturing metaphor, which was never actually, after some time, was never actually appropriate. And the manufacturing is, you always think about the like chess game, and you want to control everything because you want to be fault-free instead of fault-tolerant. And that actually what we do is much closer to the newsroom of New York Times than to any manufacturing and Ford and whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that we still bring this kind of thinking about what we do as a manufacturing line and silos, and there's no need for communication, because actually what we want to do is to have a fault-free process instead of fault-tolerant.
Yeah, so I think it is key. I think it's actually quite enlightening to look at manufacturing these days. So I think all around we're still working very much on this tailor's principle, which does work for a huge amount of problems. But when you do get into these more complicated problems, and even you see it in things like car manufacturing and so on, they they pioneered a lot of the agile and lean practices that we use today because of the increasing complexity and increasing ways that they find things. So it is about applying the right ideas and the right paradigm to the problem. So I think I'm kind of agreeing with you. I'm saying also it is also manufacturing, it's also moving in this direction, and often leading the way in this direction.
Do you have any tips for listening?
I did it there. Shut up. it's something that's so difficult to do, but it's a great tip for listening. Just keep quiet, let people talk and fill in the gaps. And you'll get it.
Actually, I think it's good to close your eyes, because when people are listening, they often do other things, play on their phones, do something else on their computers. And you actually close your eyes and just avoid any distraction. That actually helps. At least it helps me.
Yes,
just wanted to ask you to expand a little bit about how this works in our sort of distributed organisations. A lot of what you're talking about walking before this
Yes.
is made more difficult for distribution.
Yeah, so it is a tough thing, and I think we've got some talks actually later on about working into remote environments. So it definitely does make it easier. There's no substitute at the end of the day for face-to-face communication and talking to people, and also sort of building some of these sort of social interactions. But there are things you can do. You can travel around and go to the different places. You can focus heavily on using a lot of the great tools. Thankfully, it is a lot easier to have face-to-face communications with people remotely these days. And that definitely helps you pick up a lot more of the sort of the cues you miss if you've just got conversations over the phone. So I wouldn't say it's easy, but you need to be very mindful of it. You need to work hard at doing it, particularly with people who work remotely or people who work across different offices. And you do need to try and bring people together as much as possible. Okay, cool. Thank you.